You can soon join the 25 million PS5 owners. We just got some huge updates on the PSVR 2, and how is PS Plus failing and succeeding at the same time? How's it going, everyone? Welcome to PSReady. The first story I'm going to jump into today is all about the PSVR 2, because not only do we have the release date, we also have the price and the launch lineup, and it's not exactly amazing news. So let's start with the release date. This thing's coming out on February 22nd, but you can actually pre-order it on November 15th, which is right around the corner. So if you want to get your hands on one of these, I would suggest pre-ordering it, because even though the supply chain stuff that's been affecting everything and everyone for about a few years now is kind of wrapping up, it seems, it's still going to be tough to get one of these at launch, I would guess, just because we know how many they're making, which is a pretty high number, but still, new stuff from Sony is always hard to get. And now we got to talk about the price. Look, I get it. We were all kind of assuming this thing would be a little bit higher of a markup than we were expecting, just because, you know, the DualSense Edge is $200 when its competitor is selling for like $180. It's easy to see that Sony's marking this stuff up a little bit, because they have said multiple times they will not be taking a loss on hardware this generation. But this price is higher than I could have even guessed. So if you want to get a PSVR 2 day one with no games, just the headset, the controllers, the package that includes everything you need to use it, you're going to be paying $549. Now, yes, when you compare that to something like the Valve Index or the new Oculus Quest Pro Edition, I don't really know what it's called. They changed the name so much on these things. That's $1,500. The Valve Index is $1,000. Yes, $549 looks like a pretty damn good deal. But when you compare it to something like the Oculus Quest 2, which yes, it did just get a price increase, but it's still far cheaper than the PSVR 2, and it's a wireless headset that you can also plug into your PC and use as a wired VR headset, that $549 price tag looks a little crazy. And it's kind of nuts considering they need to get people in on this thing, but the launch title lineup is nothing crazy. The issue I'm seeing here is that the launch lineup of games for the PSVR 2 is a collection of games that are either available on the Oculus Quest 2 already or have been for years at this point, or some of these are even available on the PSVR 1, like After the Fall, the Jurassic World game, I think it's called Jurassic World Aftermath, and Pistol Whip VR. So from Sony, we're going to get obviously Horizon Call of the Mountain, which I think looks like an incredible VR game, but still, if I was Sony, I'd be making some pretty strong deals with companies like Valve to get the best VR game, which is Half-Life Alyx, over on the PSVR 2. And before you say they wouldn't want to do that, you can just look at the Nintendo Switch, which at the exact same time they reached their peak with the Steam Deck and everyone getting so excited about the Steam Deck, they released Portal and Portal 2 on the Nintendo Switch. So I think Sony could convince Valve to get Half-Life Alyx on the PSVR 2. Also, where are Boneworks and Bone Labs? There's some seriously big games missing here. So if you want me to spend $550 on the PSVR 2 when I can go get a headset that you can use untethered, I don't know. That doesn't really seem like the greatest sell of all time. Really, I think what would make this thing worth the cost would be being able to use it on the PC, right? Like, it's got the inside-out tracking, it's got the Sense controllers, it's got the USB-C connectivity. What is really stopping Sony from making sure that this can take advantage of Steam VR or something like that? I mean, right now, you can plug in the DualSense controller to your PC and Steam will just take over and allow it to work wirelessly with games. Even though you lose the DualSense features, unless you use it wired, you can still just do that. So yeah, I hope in the future there is some way to use this headset with PC, because that's what would make it worth the money, or at least get closer to worth the money. So yeah, while the hardware does look great, maybe they pushed it a little too far by making it such a high-end boutique premium headset, right? Like, if this is the cost that we have to pay to get a headset of this quality from Sony, maybe they should have pulled back a little bit on the quality of the headset to make that price a little bit cheaper. Or they could just do what every other console manufacturer does and sell this thing at a loss and make up for it with games. But for that, you need a lot of games at launch, and unfortunately, I don't think the launch lineup has enough heavy-hitting VR titles at this point. We could see some announcements sooner rather than later. I mean, obviously Resident Evil Village is going to be huge, and I hope they update Resident Evil 7, but still, I'd say this is a lukewarm from me on the whole launch lineup and price of the PSVR 2. But if you want one for yourself, they are going up for pre-order on November 15th, and then you'll get your hands on it on February 22nd, day one. Real quick before we jump into the rest of the video, Black Friday is coming up quick and the deals have already started. Like right now at Best Buy, you can get a 48-inch LG OLED 4K TV for $569, and that is over $730 off. And whether you grab that, a new DualSense, or a PlayStation 5 itself, every purchase you make with the links down in the description gives me a little bit of a kickback, so I appreciate it when you use them. But yeah, speaking of PC, we just had the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection launch over on Steam, and not only did it do really well on Steam charts, it's also just another really good port from Sony, and it bodes well for games like The Last of Us Part 1 and that eventual Last of Us multiplayer game having a big player base at launch, especially when you consider that that's probably coming to PS5 and PC at the same time. But one game that just came out over on PC that's not faring so well at all is Sackboy: A Big Adventure. So this game at launch was being played by around 610 people on Steam, and then it dropped to just over 300 people, so you can just assume that either people played it for a few minutes, decided they weren't into it and refunded it, or they just played it and haven't really come back to it or fell off quickly. And just for comparison's sake, this game's 600 users is being compared to something like 70,000 as the peak for God of War, or 65,000 for Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered, so you can see how big of a gulp this really is for Sony. And I've seen a lot of people being like, yeah, they should give up PS5 to PC ports now. This is like obviously not working, and you're nuts. Every other game that they've released on PC has peaked with a very high user count. It's obviously a success for them. I think what really hurt this game overall is that people, they just like aren't into Sackboy anymore. I mean, Little Big Planet 3 I don't think lit the sales charts on fire. We obviously had Sackboy come to the PS5 at launch, and I did not see a single person talking about this game. Obviously the idea of playing it on a handheld like the Steam Deck, that gets me a little more excited for it, just because I had a lot of fun with Little Big Planet Vita and Little Big Planet PSP back in the day. But still, this brand, the Little Big Planet brand, which isn't even on this game, doesn't have the same cachet as something like Ratchet and Clank or even Uncharted at this point, which hasn't had a game in quite a few years. You might have seen the news story recently about retailers selling God of War Ragnarok early, like 2 whole weeks early, and spoilers leaking online. And at the time of recording this, the reviews come out tomorrow, so by the time you see this video, the reviews will be out for God of War, and then I feel like it's all bets are off for spoilers. But still, I didn't expect Sony to be one of the companies leaking this game. So currently on the PlayStation Direct store, you can buy a bundle with a PS5 and Modern Warfare 2, and you can also pre-order a bundle that comes with the PS5 and a digital download code for God of War Ragnarok. And as it turns out, some people who are buying that Modern Warfare PS5 bundle are actually getting the God of War Ragnarok bundle in the mail, and because this game is out there for reviewers, they don't get discs in the mail. I used to get codes from Sony all the time. They actually just send you a code for the game. So once those codes are made and active, like the game is on the store, you can redeem that code and download the game to your PlayStation 5. So this God of War Ragnarok bundle that the users who bought the Modern Warfare 2 bundle are getting makes the game available as soon as you open up the PS5 and turn it on for the first time and log into the PlayStation Network. And the cool thing is Sony doesn't really ever seem to care about this. I've bought in games early from retailers who break street date before, and I brought them home, and sometimes I've played them like full weeks early before the day one patch is even out yet, and I've never had any issues with my PlayStation Network account. I've even had the same thing with Xbox as well and the Nintendo Switch. Like, once the game is out there at retailers, they kind of don't really care all that much if you are able to play it. The issue is obviously the people who play it and then go and share spoilers, because that just really sucks. I mean, right now it's November 2nd and the game comes out on November 9th, but if you don't have a PS5 and you want to maybe just take your chances, you should pick up one of these Modern Warfare 2 bundles, because either way, you're getting a really good game. Like, I've sunk a ton of hours into Modern Warfare 2 at this point, and it's my favorite Call of Duty in years, probably since Modern Warfare 2019, and before that, my favorite Call of Duty was Black Ops 2. So I feel like you should just pick up one of these bundles that has the Modern Warfare 2 game included, because you might get rewarded with a copy of God of War Ragnarok, which, you know, reviews aren't out yet, but from everything we've been hearing online in previews and stuff like that, it sounds like it's going to be an extremely good game, just like the first God of War was back in 2018. So yeah, this is just a little PSA for all you people out there. Maybe if you are looking to buy a PS5, you should check out that Modern Warfare 2 bundle. So we've heard a ton of news about Xbox not really hitting their goal that they wanted with Game Pass and all the subscriptions and stuff like that. They've even said that Game Pass is sort of stagnating on console, but they're seeing massive growth on PC. And Sony just put out their quarter 2 reports, and yeah, it doesn't look too hot for PlayStation Plus at this point in time. But there is a silver lining here for Sony that I think is worth pointing out. But let's just jump into the report. First of all, software sales are down 18%, which really isn't that much of a surprise when you look at the games we've gotten this year. I thought 2022 was going to be like a huge year for gaming, but between delays and games coming out unfinished and getting bad reviews, I mean, like Saints Row and Gotham Knights are two off the top of my head that people I feel like were pretty excited for, and then they came out and they were just complete messes. You can see why maybe people aren't spending as much on new games for their PS5. And then on top of that, the only two big games we got as PS5 releases this year were The Last of Us Part 1, which is a remake of the original Last of Us that was being sold for full price, so I doubt that sold all that well. Now we're getting God of War, which is a cross-generational game, and I think will sell pretty well, but Horizon Forbidden West came out at the same time as Elden Ring, so I don't think that was selling all that hot. And then finally we had Gran Turismo 7, which is like a microtransaction nightmare. So it's like a lot of the games Sony released, despite them being good, like Horizon Forbidden West, had a lot of weird stuff happening when they released. But next year, it looks like is going to be a much better year because we just have so many games coming out allegedly in the first half of the year, which honestly, all of those games are probably going to get delayed just because that's how it works. But still, we have a lot more awesome games coming out next year, especially if you're a horror fan like me. But the interesting thing about all this data is that overall, PlayStation Plus is down. Overall, users on the PlayStation Network are down over 2%, and PS Plus subscribers are down 4%, which is a big drop when you consider that they were at 47.3 million and now they're at 45.4 million. But the interesting thing is the revenue per subscriber was raised on the PlayStation Network by over 28%, and obviously that all comes down to people subscribing to higher tiers of PlayStation Plus. Now, I don't know who's paying for PlayStation Plus Premium right now, but either way, I would suggest dropping that down to Extra until they at least start delivering on what they promised with these classic games, which just basically stopped coming out, which is super frustrating. But I feel like PlayStation Plus Extra is actually a good deal, especially for someone who didn't have a PlayStation 4 last generation. Like, you could buy a PlayStation 5 right now and you would get access to so many great games just by subscribing to PS Plus Extra that you could play catch up for years, honestly, before you have to worry about even spending money on a brand new game. Obviously, a big factor in why the revenue is so down is because no one has been able to get a PlayStation 5 for literally the past 2 years. It's been harder and harder to get them instead of easier and easier like you would see in a normal console launch cycle. But like I mentioned, and we'll talk about in a minute, console sales are going to increase dramatically over the next year just because consoles are becoming more available, and the timing could not be better because, like I mentioned in the last story, there's going to be a lot of games coming out over the next year. Like, the floodgates are really opening with God of War. I mean, I'm excited for that game. I'm going to play it, but man, the Callisto Protocol in December, that's my bread and butter right there. A new game from the creator of Dead Space that's even gorier and crazier. Like, sign me the up for that. And then next year I've got games like Resident Evil 4 Remake coming out, which, like, I am going to sink so much time into that. That's a game for me that I will play multiple times just over and over because it's a remake of literally a game that's in my top 3 favorites of all time. Another core piece headed in this earning update is that Sony has not only sold 25 million PS5s at this point in time, they also want to sell 23 million more in the next year. Like, November 2020 to November 2022, they managed to sell 25 million PS5s in that time, and by next year, by next November, they want to sell that same amount of PlayStation 5s. And that sort of lines up with what we've been seeing, where people are walking into Target, walking into Best Buy, walking into Walmart, and seeing PS5s on shelves. I go to Target a lot. That's where I do most of my grocery shopping, and I always try to check if there's a PS5 sitting on the shelf, and I've actually seen one, which is pretty crazy considering that you have not been able to get these things for 2 years now. Of course, there is that looming threat of the PS5 Slim and the PS5 Pro on the horizon, but I feel like those are going to take a little bit longer than people are expecting. So this Christmas time, you see a PlayStation 5 on the shelf and you got $500 burning a hole in your pocket, I would still pick one up before that price increase that hit the rest of the world comes and hits us here in our wallets in America. And really, this has been the theme of the whole video, but I feel like there's no better time for this increase in shipments of the PlayStation 5. If they really can sell 23 million of these things in the next year, that means that this shortage that we've been seeing is basically over, and that'll help the PS5 get out there. And the big benefit of having that happen is, of course, that we'll see less and less cross-generational games. I'm really hoping that Resident Evil 4 Remake now is the last cross-generational big game we have, just because I'm sick of these games games that we've had that really just are upscaled PS4 games that we're playing on the PlayStation 5. I get why they were doing it. There just weren't enough PS5s out there to recoup the investment on those games. And I've heard the Herman Hulst say that they see the 100 million PS4s out there, but still, you guys got to move on from that console, man. We need to take advantage of this new next-gen console because people have spent a lot of money on this thing and it has untapped potential that I'd really like to see tapped into.